for the opportunity that we've had to worship you this morning. We thank you for your love for us and how it is unending and immeasurable. There's nothing that we can do to change it. No good thing that we can do to make you love us more. No bad thing we do that makes you love us less. Lord, we thank you for your protection, for your provision, for your leading, for bringing us here today. And we just pray that you would encourage us as we look at this message to be aware of the work that you're doing in and around us, because it's important. We pray this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So last week we talked about Jesus being the right way is the narrow way. Remember that? The right way is the narrow way. And we talked about how there were false prophets who dress up as wolves in sheep's clothing. And I don't think you grasp the significance of what that means, so I've got a visual aid. Garrett, could you show us what that means?
Oh, no.
There's several. Yeah.
So,
The sheep are tuned down to real.
oh yeah. You know, and that raises the question for me, obviously, Jesus putting the fact that there are wolves in sheep's clothing as a danger for us in keep getting us off of the narrow way. Now, once you get saved, you can't lose your salvation, but you can be distracted from helping others get on the narrow way. You can get off the narrow way yourself as far as the living for the Lord, but you can't totally be removed from it because you can't lose your salvation. But I've seen many people through the years walk away from their faith or go off on some tangent that just totally ruins them as far as any kind of kingdom work. I don't know if you've seen that happen to people, but it happens, and it happens often. So as we consider this, the next sermon that I'm going to be preaching on this series is Jesus is the right way. And but before I get into the passage, I wondered, what does a godly person look like? Do you know what a godly person looks like? Can you give me some just things that describe what a godly person looks like? What do you think?
Humble.
Humble.
Joyous.
Joyous, okay.
Kind.
Kind.
Honest.
Honest, integrity, very close together.
Loving.
Loving, okay. What else?
Caring.
Caring, definitely caring.
Forgiving.
Forgiving,
Sacrificial.
okay.
Confident.
Confident, okay. What else? Any other? These are good. These are all good things.
Are you looking for something?
No. I'm just looking for some. Tom, that's funny. There are times when I am looking for something, but this is not one of those times.
A prayer warrior. Sacrificing.
A godly person is a well-rounded Christian, right? There's no areas in their life where there's gaping holes of things that are considered godly, spiritual, that just kind of not annoy, but ignore. So as we look at this, is it always easy to tell the difference between the godly person and the wolf in sheep's clothing?
No.
It's not. It's not easy. A godly person can seem, or a wolf in sheep's clothing can seem like a lot of the things that we described. Say the right things, do the right things externally to make you think that they're godly, when in actuality they're wolves. And so this morning I want us to look at this story about Jesus healing the man born blind and try to identify the wolf as I read the story. Now you should be able to do this. I think it's pretty obvious. But tell me what makes the wolf obvious. What is it that the wolf does that makes the wolf obvious? Okay? All right? Let's start in the story. So Jesus is he's going about his life, he's ministering, and this is what I love about the stories about Jesus, is that he's just living daily life. He's just going from one day to the next, to the next, to the next, just like we do, right? Except he knows, unlike we, what's coming ahead. And Jesus is every day. Jesus is walking. He's taking one step closer to the cross, and he knows that. And yet, it's not about the cross. Have you ever been anxious about something? Something that's going to happen? I remember when we were going to buy the land, and we didn't have enough money, and it became obvious that we weren't going to be able to get enough money, and so we offered on the land. I lost sleep. I was just so anxious about that whole situation. And then we couldn't offer anymore, and so we had to step out of the bidding, and it was over, right? And then 2 days later, they call and say, hey, if you re-enter that bid, we'll take it. And I had stopped worrying at that point, because it was over, right? But, if we were Jesus, we would be looking at the cross and totally distracted by it. But Jesus is just living, and he's thinking about other people. He's loving the people around him. And so in verse 1 it says, now Jesus passed by, and he saw a man who was born blind from birth. Now this is significant. Blindness is a terrible thing. There are a lot of people who are blind, and they function in their blindness, and it requires an element of internal strength and fortitude to be able to overcome that obstacle in a seeing world. But being born blind, we don't even know what that meant. We don't hear the description of what that looked like. Pardon the... I'm sorry, I have that cold that everybody's been passing around all. Oh. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. But he may not even have eyeballs. There are children who are born blind who don't even have eyeballs in their sockets, right? He may not have had retinas, or he may not have had nerves, optical nerves going from his eye to his brain, or we just don't know what was wrong with his eyes, but it was significant, and he was born that way. So it's not necessarily just, he was blind, but there was some thing there, very possibly, that was missing. And so as they're passing by, the disciples, who are so empathetic, so compassionate, like we're talking about earlier, they say, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Whose fault is it? Who can we point the finger of blame to in this situation? Because obviously something so bad and so terrible must have been precipitated by somebody's actions, because bad things don't happen unless somebody's at fault. How many of you believe that? There are a lot of us who believe that if I do things perfectly, bad things won't happen. But there are bad things that happen regardless of how perfectly we do them. Right? So Jesus answers, and he says, neither this man nor his parents sinned. Well, obviously the man sinned and his parents sinned, so he wasn't talking about the fact that they sinned. I think he was talking about the fact that they didn't sin in a way that precipitated his blindness, right? But he was born blind that the works of God should be revealed in him. Can something bad be for the glory of God? Something that seems so bad as being born blind? It can be. And so Jesus said in verse 4, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So Jesus is, what is he saying about himself? He is the right way. I've got to do this job that God has given me to do, to love people, to demonstrate what godliness is, and be the way that brings people to the Father. Verse 6, he says, when he said these things, I love this, he spat on the ground. How many of you would appreciate this? No, it's a good thing the guy was blind, because he couldn't see what Jesus was doing. He spits on the ground, in the dirt, clay, and he makes clay out of it with his saliva. So he takes this clay, it sounds like he spit on the ground and then picked it up, right? And then he's got this ball of clay, dirt, mixed with his
Yummy.
saliva, right? And what was Adam made out of? Dirt. Adam was made out of dirt. And so, I was thinking about this morning is, if he had no eyes, I could just see Jesus is making eyeballs out of the mud. And he puts the mud on his eyes, and we don't know, we weren't there, but am I grossing you out? Is this gross? So it's almost as if Jesus is creating whatever it is that's missing with the dirt that God used to create Adam in the beginning. Right? And so in verse 7 he says to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which is translated sent. And so he went and he washed and he came back seeing. Jesus revealed to his disciples that the man's blindness was not the result of God's judgment for some specific person's sin, but so that the works of God could be revealed through his healing. And that's what happened. It was revealed through his healing. So then we move on, in verse 8, we come into the conflict of the story. That's the setting of the story. Here's the conflict, okay? There's always got to be, every story has conflict. Good story has conflict. That's why I don't want to have a life that's a story. I just want a life that's a setting, right? We don't want a life that's a story, we want a life that's a setting. So it says, so his neighbors come and they say, "Hey, aren't you Jeremiah, the guy who, I gave money to?" And then some people, "No, that's not Jeremiah. He doesn't look like it." "Yeah, it's me. Hello, it's me." And so they said, how did you see? How were your eyes opened? Now, it sounds like he had never opened his eyelids. Again, we don't know what was wrong. So he said, "A man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.'" So he's giving exactly what happened. "So I went and I washed and I received my sight." Don't know anything else. Can't explain anything else. This is exactly what happened. This is all I know. Right? Then they said to him, "Where is he?" "How would I know? I was blind when he was here earlier." So they brought him, who formerly was blind, to the Pharisees. Okay, good. Now, in verse 14, here's the conflict. It was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. So apparently spitting on the ground, bending over, picking up the wet, goopy dirt and mixing it in your hands and putting it on somebody's eyes is considered a violation of the Sabbath based on the traditions of the fathers. Now, violating the Sabbath was a bad thing. It was a bad thing for the Jews. It goes all the way back to Moses delivering the children of Israel out of Egypt, and they get to the, they cross the Red Sea, and now they're on their way to Mount Sinai, and a guy, they're told not to work on the Sabbath and not to pick up manna and stuff. So a guy, he goes out and he's gathering sticks. Why do you gather sticks? Well, we gather sticks because we want to clean our yard, but back then they gathered sticks because they wanted to make a fire, right? So this guy was gathering sticks to make a fire. So he was doing work to do something that was against the Sabbath, violated the Sabbath. And you know what happened to him? They stoned him to death. Yep. So it was a big deal. Violating the Sabbath was a big deal. But the Pharisees had made it so, little conditions and, exclusions and all kinds of rules about how you could or could not violate the Sabbath. So apparently making mud with your spit is a violation. So, there was no eyewitnesses. Yes, Marty. Yes. That was Marty who said that, right, Marty? Yeah. So the Pharisees asked him again, how did you receive your sight? And he said, "He put clay on my eyes and I washed and I see." So the Pharisees said, "Well, this man," now they're judging Jesus' godliness. Is that ironic? "This man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who's a sinner do such signs?" So they were arguing about it. The Pharisees could not accept the healing of the man born blind as a work of God because it was done on the Sabbath and violated their traditions. That was all that was about. So they said again to the man in verse 17, "What do you say about him because he opened your eyes?" Now, it's not just that he opened his eyes, but what does this mean to you? How do you feel about this situation? And so he says, well, I think he's a prophet. I mean, healing people who are born blind is not a very common occurrence. He has to have some kind of connection with God, so he said he was a prophet. But the Jews didn't believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of the one who had received his sight. So they asked the parents, saying, "Is this your son?" Well, yes, this is my son. Was he born blind? Yes. Then how does he see? And so their answer was, we know that this is our son and he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we don't know. Or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He's of age, ask him. He will speak for himself. Now, why did they say that? That seems kind of rude.
They didn't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, because the Jews had already agreed that anybody who stood up as a witness in favor of Jesus, that he was the Christ, was going to be kicked out of the synagogue. Right? Therefore his parents said, "He's of age, ask him." So they again called the man who was blind and said, "Give God the glory." Again, irony here. "Give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner." And he answered and said, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I know," and I love that everybody, this is one of the greatest lines of all history, that though I was blind, now I see. There's no questions. This is it. This is what it is. So the Pharisees, what were they doing?
Trying to convict you.
They were trying to convict Jesus. And so what tools were they using to do this? To try to... Fear. Okay. Legalism, intimidation, right? Bullying. They attacked the credibility of the man born blind. You know, that you weren't really blind. So then it continues to escalate now. We're going into the climax of the situation. It says, they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" I love this. This guy's got some moxie. I mean, this guy, he is just standing toe-to-toe to these guys. But he's been blind his whole life, and he's been intimidated by people his whole life, and now he sees that they're just people. These are just people. So he answers and says, "I told you already. Didn't you listen? Do you want to become one of his disciples?" And they reviled him and said, "You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he's from." And so the man said, "Why, this is a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he's from, and yet he opened my eyes." You guys are supposed to be in the know. You guys are supposed to be the leaders here, the spiritual gurus that all of us will be going to, and you don't know where he's from. In verse 31 it says, now this is the man talking, and he's lecturing the Pharisees now. "Now we know that God does not hear sinners." He's been hearing this his whole life. He's been pointed at and ridiculed and told this his whole life that God doesn't hear sinners. That's why you're blind and you're staying blind. "We know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears them. You've been telling me this my entire life. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not do this thing." You agree with that? Yep. Absolutely. He could not have done that thing. So the Pharisees based their conclusions about Jesus on their knowledge of his origins. The man born blind based his conclusions about Jesus on Jesus' actions and his understanding of the character of God. See, as we are faced with the wolves that come in, and there are wolves all over the place, and they're constantly trying to come in and destroy the work of God, whether they're aware of it or not. I'm not saying that everybody who is used as a wolf is a terrible person, but there are people. In my life, I've been a wolf at times, not unknowingly, and it's just something that we're all prone to. I mean, you look at Peter on his as Jesus is going on the way to the cross, and he asks Peter, "Who do men say that I am?" And what does Peter say? "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And then he said, "God has told you not this, not men." And then he says, "And now I'm going to the cross, and I'm going to die on the cross and be buried and rise again." And Peter takes him aside and he says, "You should not be talking like that. You should not say that." And what does Jesus say? Get behind me, Satan. I was reading this morning in my Bible reading in Luke, Jesus' temptation. It says that after Jesus was tempted, the devil went away to come back at a more opportune time.
Yeah.
So what was Peter in that moment? He was a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was trying to get Jesus to step off of the way. Right? So even Peter, at times, we can all become wolves, I think, at times, if we're not careful. So as we're doing this, how do we measure whether a person is a wolf or not? Because most of the time, in the midst of that situation, there's conflict. You have the wolf who is trying to lead in one direction, and the way, which is taking us into another direction. And this wolf, how do you measure that? Well, I think you measure that by the actions of the wolf and the character, what you know about the character of God. That's the only way we can make this decision about whether or not a person is a wolf or not, or acting as a wolf in this situation. So in verse 34, the Pharisees, what do they say? "You were completely born in sins, and you are teaching us?" And they cast him out. What did the disciples ask Jesus in the beginning? Who sinned because of this that caused the situation? And what were the conclusions that the Pharisees drew about the situation? Somebody sinned to cause that man's blindness, right? So Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and he went and found him and said to them, "Do you believe in the Son of God?" So Jesus walks up to this guy. He says, "Excuse me, do you believe in the Son of God?" Does the guy recognize Jesus? No, he's never seen Jesus. And so he says, "Who is he, Lord, that I might believe in him?" Master, he's saying master here. "Who is he that I might believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking to you." Then he said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. A glorious moment for a man who'd just been kicked out of his synagogue. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into the world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be blind." Now a wolf, a true wolf, now we're not talking about Christians who are just being used as wolves, but a true wolf is trying to change the way, to make the broad way look like the narrow way. And that person believes they see the truth. The person who believes in some other religion other than the gospel, the truth, salvation by grace through faith, believes what they're saying, that they see the truth, like that saying we had last week, where there are hundreds of paths up the mountain, and they all lead to the same place. The only person wasting their time is the one who's going around the bottom of the mountain, telling everybody else that they're on the wrong path. You know, that person thinks they know, that they see what truth is and how to get to heaven, right? They think they know. But Jesus came to show the people who thought they saw, that to show them that they were blind, and the people who were blind, who didn't know how to get to heaven, to see how to get there by grace through faith. And this is what Jesus says in verse 40. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said, "Are we blind also?" So obviously there were Pharisees who were following Jesus. They were a part of the group. They were the crowd. They were Jesus' followers, these Pharisees. So Jesus says to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin." But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. And so I think what he's saying there is that you're saying that you know how to get to heaven and it's by works. And so because of that, your sin remains and you're blind. But if you said, Lord, show us the way to heaven, we don't know, we can't see, we're blind, then you would be in a place where you could hear the gospel, you could hear Jesus' words, and you could worship him as the Son of God and be saved. But because they didn't, they were blind. So the Pharisees drew the same conclusions the disciples did in the beginning of the story, that he was born blind because of someone's sin. And because of that, his testimony about Jesus was invalid. But Jesus came and revealed himself to as the Son of God and explained his purpose, to open the eyes of those who cannot see and declare that those who think they do are blind. And that's the same work that we're doing today. Are there people who think they're going to heaven who are not? Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's true in the church, but it's also true out of the church, that there are many religions in the world saying that this is how to get to heaven, and they're not getting there. They think they see how to get to heaven, but they're blind. And it's our job to tell them that, to say, no, that's not the way to heaven, this is the way to heaven. Salvation is by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. Jesus is the right way. The Pharisees didn't think he was the right way. They thought he was a sinner. He was born in sin. He was a blasphemer. He was a Sabbath violator. But he was the Son of God. So I have some application I want to draw from this story. The first is, sometimes our judgments about people can get in the way of seeing God's work. Have you ever done that, judged people? Is it easy to do? Am I the only person who has a problem judging people? You look at somebody and, whatever it is, the thing that you don't like about people, whether, it used to be way back in the 50s. I wasn't around in the 50s. In the 80s at Moody Bible Institute, you could not have a beard, and your hair could not touch your collar. Because if it did, you were a hippie.
Really?
Yes. And that was bad. That was very bad.
Shocker.
So we can do that. I mean, whatever it is you tend to judge people by, whether there's some really different people around today, and they're just normal people. You can have people with tattoos all over their body, and they're just normal, everyday people, good people. So whatever the piercings and the hair, and it's just sometimes our judgments about people can get in the way of seeing God's work in that person. Who knows what God is doing in that person's life, what work God would have you be a part of in that person's life. But if you refuse to be a part because of some external thing that you're judging them by, you're not going to be a part of what God is doing. Sometimes the contradiction between God's work and our preconceived ideas about how God should work can confuse us. Do you ever have preconceived ideas about how God should work in a situation? Yeah. Right? It happens. What? God doesn't work like that. So as we're doing these things, we can be confused. If we can be confused by God's work, certainly a wolf in sheep's clothing can take advantage of that and confuse us even more. So we need to be on the lookout for false prophets who use what? What were the tools that the wolves used in this situation to try to control it?
Confusion.
Intimidation, fear, bullying, threats. So, can we generalize and say that a person who is using intimidation, bullying, fears, and threats is acting like a wolf? Whether they're a true wolf or just a Christian who's playing the role of a wolf? Can we agree that that's not right? And that we in the church should not behave that way? Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Not to say that I'm never going to do it. Okay? I fall to temptation just like everybody else does. But when I do, I am fulfilling the role of a wolf. And it should be obvious, and we should acknowledge that it's not right. That is not how God works. It's not how God would like us to behave. So we need to evaluate our teachers, our leaders, by their deeds, threatening, whatever, those things, and by what we know about the character of God, not just on how spiritual they sound, because wolves always sound spiritual. Always. Until they're not. But by that time, guess what? It's too late. You're already halfway eaten, so. All right. And then finally, standing up to false prophets may put us on their blacklist. And this is the 1950s saying I want to throw in here. But we will be aces with God if we do. Remember that saying? Be aces with somebody. It was an old saying where you are that kind of person that they want to be around. So standing up to false prophets may put us on their blacklist, but we will be aces with God if we do. Was the man born blind aces with Jesus after he got kicked out of the synagogue? He was. He was. While there will be always be differences and misconceptions in the body of Christ, and there will be, we're always going to have conflicts and we're going to have issues and we're going to have to work through things. There is a very, very real danger of false prophets diverting us from the narrow way. That's what we have to really worry about, is those people. We can work through conflict, but when we have a false prophet, a wolf in sheep's clothing, trying to divert us from the narrow way, we're in trouble. So be on your guard and measure everything you hear by their character and the character of God. That's how we can tell. And when we are when we're aware and we're doing that, we're not going to end up with a wolf in the midst of our flock, wondering, hey, where did Bob go? All right, let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you are the God who is in control and that you are aware of the fact that we are facing these issues in our church, in our community, in our Christian lives. Even now, as we talk about launching the second service in Richmond, it opens the door, Lord, for wolves to come in and to try to destroy the work that you're doing in our midst. Lord, we want to be wary of them. Help us to be conscious of the threat and to be on the lookout for that wolfish behavior. And we thank you that you are in control and that whatever happens, you are our God and you love us. We pray this in Jesus' name. Why don't you stand with me?
We were made to thrive.